Hey everyone, today we are working on our Keihin flat slide carburetor, and we're doing a bit mid-body gasket kit as well as just cleaning the whole thing. And normally you don't need to touch or adjust the TPS while cleaning the carburetor, but if you want to double check the measurement on your TPS, maybe you're installing a new one, or maybe you just think that was never set up right. There are measurements you can take. That's something you want to do. If you had the adjuster screw all the way out, or you're doing an idle drop, something like that, you want to do these measurements after you set this other stuff up. The purpose of this sensor is to help adjust ignition timing for the best performance. The CDI does have a default map if this sensor is unplugged, and you can use that knowledge for testing if you suspect you have a faulty sensor. But with that said, these sensors are pretty much all the same. You do want to check the specs in your model specific service manual because there are some variances, but all this is a potentiometer. So you have 3 wires, and between the black and blue one, typically you're going to have 4,000 to 6,000 ohms of resistance is what's normal. And then between the yellow and black wire at idle or at that closed throttle position, it should measure between 0.6 and 1K ohms. Now, some manuals are going to tell you to check voltages. So again, check out your specific manual and verify that. But for our bike, we're going to be using ohms. So we'll go ahead and take some of these measurements. Now, anytime you are testing ohms, you need to have the component disconnected from the rest of the wiring harness. So obviously with this on the bench, we are disconnected, and I don't want to damage these connectors on the front. So I'm going to back probe the wires, and all that means is take a paper clip or some safety wire or whatever you have. You're going to slide it against the wire until it makes contact with that connector or terminal inside. And I'm going to make that easier with little silicone spray. There's just some little grommets in the back that keep moisture, things like that out. We're going to slide down in there. And if your manual wants you to run your bike, this is what you're going to have to do, since the connector does have to be connected for those tests. So the first test we're doing is in ohms. We've got an auto ranging meter, but make sure you are in the K ohm settings or 1000 ohm settings if you have a different meter. We're going to make a check between our blue and black wire first. This will be a constant resistance that doesn't change and is used for reference. I'm just putting the red lead on the blue, black on black. So we've got 4.4 K ohms. So we are right within spec, but with that, on these Hondas, you want to write that down. We're going to plug it into a formula. And then once I plug that number into this formula, that gives us the range of adjustment where this needs to be. So to plug this into the equation, we've got 4.4 times 0.13. That's going to give us 0.572 K ohms. And then we've got 4.4 times 0.15. That's going to give us 0.660 K ohms. That's the spec for our variable resistance at idle or closed throttle. So how we check that now to see if we're in the right spot for our sensor adjustment is take this red lead, move it to the yellow wire, and you don't want these to short across, otherwise obviously you're going to get the wrong reading. But right here we're 0.766 right in there. So ideally we would move this just a little bit. And I like the way Honda has you do this, just because the ohms can change based on temperature. So I'm just going to crack that loose enough to move this. And I'm going to try to decrease the ohms into the right spot. Going to tighten that down. So right there, we're pretty close to the upper end, but it is within that spec. Ideally, you want to center it up. But just to give you an idea, if I go all the way, that's where we were at. If we go all the way in the other direction, We're almost 1,000 ohms of difference. So that's how you inspect the sensor, by measuring resistance. But if your manual recommends checking voltage, it's going to be a very similar process. So you're going to start with the blue and black wire. That's going to be your input voltage, and it should be between 4 and 6 volts. Then you move the lead over to the yellow wire. That's going to be your output voltage, and at idle, for example, a YZ450F, that voltage should be right around 0.58 to 0.78 volts. But again, check your manual, and obviously this connector has to be connected to take those measurements. If you're out of spec anywhere, definitely need to get this replaced. Now with this, we don't see a lot of issues with these sensors, but if you suspect it's bad, maybe you have issues with acceleration or a hanging idle, and you've already gone through your carburetor, checked your valve clearances, and checked everything that's obvious, one thing you can do to check this sensor is disconnect it, unplug it from the bike, and then run the bike. If everything clears up, then you know you have issues with this. But if you're just doing a carb rebuild like us and you want to have peace of mind that this thing is working properly, then just test it anyway. Now the last check we can do is make sure that the resistance is good all the way throughout the range. So at the bottom, we're starting at 0.6 k ohms, and at the top, you're going to read anywhere from 3.2 to 5 k ohms. And you just want to make sure that the numbers go or increase fairly smoothly all the way to the top, and then same thing as you go down. If you have any weird dropouts in the numbers, then you know that sensor is bad and you want to get it replaced. So we're 4.0 at the top. .6 at the bottom. So we know the sensor is good and we're ready for reassembly. So that's it for replacing the throttle position sensor. And if you have any questions, leave those down in the comments. And if you need any parts for your bike, you can find that stuff on our website. Just click the link in the description below. Now we do have other videos on this style of carburetor, whether it's just cleaning, you want to go through the whole carburetor, you want to do the mid body, or if you have questions about the accelerator pump, we have separate videos for those. So check them out and subscribe to our channel. I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Thanks for watching.